Welcome, everybody. You're watching or listening to the Life Enthusiast online radio and TV network. I'm Scott Patton. Joining us as usual, the founder of Life Enthusiast, Martin Patella. And we've got a very, very special guest. I'll let Martin tell you a little bit about him right now.
Hello and welcome, everyone. I would like to introduce Elijah Free, an esteemed herbalist of great length of career and great following and success. I have been introduced to Elijah a few years ago and was astounded and amazed at the depth of the work that he has done, but I would like him to tell us in his own words. Elijah lives in California, has many years of practice, is a veteran and works with veterans, and is a man that I bow to and honor. Elijah Free.
Hello, Martin. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. I'm very grateful for it, to be able to tell people all about our Earth Friend herbs. One of the things about us is we are actually one of the oldest companies in the United States. We began back in the very early 80s. In fact, it was in Lexington, Massachusetts, and it was with the same people at that time who began Gaia Herbs and also Jeremy Rose / another company that I can't quite think of their name at the moment, very famous. Anyhow, those gentlemen had decided to stay. They worked in a store. One was the owner and one was the manager, and I was the local practitioner. We all began at the same time. They went more into creating these remarkable companies for many, many years. Well, I wanted to stay a practitioner and learn and develop my line through actual practice. So our formulas are actually designed and used in a clinical situation. But we've been around now, like I said, since about 1982 or 1981. We had a slightly different name at that time, and then we went with Earth Friend Herbs. So a couple of the things that make us a bit different, again, is the amount of time that I myself have actually been working in the field. I've logged in now probably just about 40 years in the medical field, between working in the service in the late 60s as a paramedic. As a civilian afterwards, I worked as a paramedic and also trained them. I was an operating room technician, circulating nurse, a physician's assistant, before they actually had the full program. And strangely enough, I worked at Walpole Prison, running a medical shift where I actually knew the Boston Strangler very well. So I have kind of an unusual background, but for many, many years now I've worked in the natural healing field. My medical office where I've worked, Pacific Naturopathic in Mountain View, California, I've been there now for 15.5 years, is one of the main medical associates.
So Elijah, you actually work several days a week treating clients and working with actual people, body to body, hand to hand.
Oh yes, we put in quite a few hours at our clinic. I work with a group of 3 naturopathic doctors and 1 medical doctor there. Half of what I do is all herbal work. The other form is the type of body work that I developed. But one of the beauties about our formulas is that how they often get developed, it's through a patient's needs. So for example, a patient may come in, there's nothing available at all. I actually design it. It's at no charge, and we always give away the first batch to patients. So as a result, we have a wonderful way to test our formulas. At the worst, they don't work. At the best, they do rather things that people often call miraculous, because it's a different form of chemistry that I've actually developed. So again, all of our products are actually used within a clinical situation before we even think about releasing them on the market. And by then, we've logged in probably hundreds of hours and bottles of those, being able to see how they actually do perform.
So how do you actually choose the ingredients as far as quality control, or how could we assure people that what they're going to get is going to be as good as we claim?
Quality control is important. When I first started decades ago, well, it was a little bit hit and miss. Fortunately, over the years, what's happened is all kinds of conventions have occurred. We very carefully purchase our herbs from several houses here in the United States that sell just to professionals. We can get at any time guaranteed papers on these as to the authenticity of them, not just of their ingredients, that they are actually that, but also as to the purity of them. Some of the herbs that I use have actually fallen out of usage somewhat. They're made by the old timers now, and I'm probably one about, well, I hate to say this, but I'm probably one of the last of the old-time herbalists left on the planet at this point, at least in this country. So some of the things through the houses we have very specially wildcrafted for us. We ran into a remarkable gift several years ago, which was a gentleman up in Canada who is a remarkable buff and has an herb house up there, and he gets things from around the world. Now, fascinatingly enough, is when they come in, of course, they're all tested and everything for their purity, but he's able to go to places. For example, we needed a particular herb. He got us one. It's grown in India at an Ayurvedic hospital for their own use. Totally organic, of course. With that, but we're able to get some of that through the house in India. So we get things which are very unusual. Contacts are very important. And one of the things that's happening is the herbal pharmacopoeia has been shrinking over the years. Herbs seem to have their half-life in terms of popularity, but there's a lot of things now that are actually very difficult to get, and we've been very fortunate that we've had such wonderful contacts, but we're uber, super-duper fussy. A tincture, for example, that we may make that could be good on for 5 years stored, we keep it, this is a tincture, of course, we keep it for 2 years maximum. Anything that has a life, we keep it for only half or less of that. We throw it away, and then we start from a fresh batch. So we're really trying to give the all-time best that we can. We call it medicinal quality, and we see that with our patients also, too. That's part of why they like our herbs, is because of the concentration, how they're produced, and also the quality of them. I know that was a long answer, but it's an important one.
Yeah, I'd be actually interested in hearing how you came to be a herbalist.
Me?
Yeah.
Well, when I was younger, I was born in 1950. Now you know how old I am. Of course, it was just regular traditional allopathic medicine. But I was one of those people that was always sensitive to suffering of others and animals and things, and always wanted to be able to help. When I went into the service in 1968, they made me a medic because I had worked one summer for 2 weeks in Central Supply. My uncle was a hospital administrator, filling in, and that made me pretty much a doctor. So they made me a medic in the Air Force, which remarkably was probably the most incredibly brilliant, wonderful thing that ever happened to me. It was one of them. When I came out of the service, I worked in the field for a while. I was a paramedic and operating room tech, as I mentioned. Later on, I did some other things. And then I had a very serious back injury, and I healed it myself. And people began to come to me for healing, for the body work. And this may sound funny, but one morning I woke up and realized I was an herbalist. And it just came natural to me. It was like remembering. I mean, it was like learning to walk. You know, it's in our DNA, it's in our brain, it's in our soul. But for me, I mean, not getting metaphysical, I think I've done this an awful lot of times before. It's the great love of my life, and to me it's like a communing, more of a medicine man kind of thing or shamanic thing. But my studies have enabled me to actually create a whole form of chemistry for herbs that is very, very different. It deals with restoring chemical chains. It took a long time to do this and to learn this. But we're actually able to go in now, and this is really cool, and we've got some amazing things that are beginning to happen around this, and actually repair chemical chains. A good example is in the fibromyalgia formula, which was the first one that I made like that. It only has 5 herbs in it, but what it does, it actually goes in and corrects. Well, let's start with this. There's something in there that inhibits a particular absorption of a mineral in a very unusual spectrum. I was able to isolate that. Once I produce the formula, what it does is it actually plugs right in and corrects the missing nutrients that form that incorrect metabolic chain. As a result, it corrects it. Now, what it does then is it doesn't force the fibromyalgia to do anything. It actually normalizes part of the functions of the body, the actual metabolism of the body. As such, the body's normalized, and then the body actually reabsorbs back the extra exudated fibrinous material itself because it no longer is capable of that. In other words, all it does is normalize the body. The intelligence of the body takes over. So the formula is called a passive formula. It does not antagonize the tissue whatsoever, normalizes the metabolism, and the body then literally disallows the condition. Over a period of time then, the body just restores itself naturally. So this is what we work on now. So a lot of the formulas are passive, semi-passive, and are non-antagonistic. As a result, we heal and not harm.
Cool. Well, this might be a good time for us to actually talk about, since you brought up fibromyalgia, let's talk a little bit about the Fibro-Ease and how it works. You talked a bit about it. Let's talk a little bit more about it.
Okay. It's actually a very simple formula. One day I was working with a patient, and I had this inspiration. She had really bad fibromyalgia. You can actually read about it on the website, and also Life Enthusiast. They have a lot of the testimonials. And I was thinking, what actually allows fibrin to occur? Or what is the nutrition that actually allows fibrin to break down and to be reabsorbed by the body? Well, when I thought of that, it became actually very clear to me what the problem was. We designed a very, very simple formula. As I said, it only has 5 herbs, only 4 are active, and one of them actually is a director herb. So again, what it does is it goes in and it literally plugs in. So sort of think of like, here's the problem caused by the lack of this particular element in the body. Now, actually what causes this, and this is not my research, this is actually medical research, is an over-estrogenization of the system. When that happens, it inhibits this particular element. It's actually in the rarefied potassium strata, an unusual aspect of that, but it appears in these particular herbs. Putting it together, this is what it does. So let's say the problem is over here. Now, we cannot go in underneath that and correct this particular problem, which is hormonal in nature. We could design a formula for every person on the earth that has it, and in 2 days, we would need to rectify and change the formula. But what we can do is we can go right over that, go into that chemical chain, add something into there, and it corrects it. So as a result, that signal then the body getting is the correct signal on what to do. Otherwise, it's given an incorrect signal, and the incorrect signal tells the fibrin, which rests and resides between the layers of fascia of the body. It's part of a protectant and lubricant and all these things in there. Well, what happens is it tells it, well, it's okay to kind of go haywire. When that occurs, as a result, the fibrin in the body begins to grow. It's just like a seed. You know, once the seed starts, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Fibromyalgia, or fibrinous tissue, as I kind of prefer to call it, resides in the large, heavy muscles of the body, mostly, like the trapezius, the rhomboids. When it's enough, you can get it in the buttocks and in the legs and all kinds of places. I've seen some people with remarkable amounts of it. Well, this goes in and corrects it, disallows that condition, and the body then reabsorbs it back over a period of time, which is much, much faster. Exactly, than when it began to occur. So it's a very, very simple formula that works in a very simple manner, and that was the first of the metabolic formulas that I designed very successfully. As a note, the first design worked perfectly. We actually called it DS1. It stood for dissolve, number 1, the formula, but it actually doesn't dissolve it. The body reabsorbs it back and then basically just eliminates it out of the body.
Yeah, I actually have some of the original DS1 here in my office. And of course, and here's the more commercially successful,
there we go,
proper looking label. So we have definitely upgraded the situation from this to this, right?
Very much.
And so, Elijah, how does this relate back to people who have all these other symptoms that are associated with inflammatory, autoimmune disorders? I mean, there are all these other things that come into play. They could be things like chronic fatigue or headaches, backaches, you know, all the other symptoms that run along typically in this cluster of problems.
Well, fibromyalgia syndrome, we have to remember the word syndrome after that. Actually, this is one of our patented formulas, and the patent was paid for by a very wonderful neurologist down in Southern California. And one of the things he always would talk about syndrome, he says syndrome basically means we really don't know what's going on. Think of it this way. You've got 10 people and their cars won't start. So they call the mechanic, and the one guy may say, well, you've all got car won't start itis. The similar symptom is none of your cars would start. Well, someone comes down and looks at these, and one person, even though the symptoms is the main one, the car won't start, what they see is, well, you're out of gas. You don't have your keys. You threw an engine rod. You don't have any oil. You don't have this. Everybody has a different cause, but yet the symptom looks the same. This is what we call a one-trick pony formula, but the trick is great. It's like the pony can leap over the Grand Canyon. So in terms of fibrinous tissue, really autoimmune doesn't really come into this. People get very tired with this and exhausted because they don't sleep well. Fibrinous tissue is several times denser than regular tissue. So as a result, what happens is it's always constantly pulling toward the point of least resistance. When that happens, it keeps you awake at night, you don't rest. So it can tire down the system quite dramatically. When this happens, people can get other symptoms. But the main thing that it corrects is, again, that chemical chain, incorrect one, that allows the fibrinous tissue. I've seen people who can't do much of anything. As they recover from this, their lives recur once again, only because some of the symptomology of other things disappear because of the fact that they're happier, out of pain, can move, eat better, and those type of things.
Well, we have been dealing with all kinds of people who are told that they have fibromyalgia, and they present with a variety of symptoms, the ones that I just mentioned, you know, the fatigue, the relentless pain, the brain fog, those kind of issues. So this fibrin dissolving formula doesn't specifically address those. They need to be addressed in a different way.
Yes, those symptoms may be a secondary effect of having the fibrinous tissue because how it affects their life. But we would call those secondary effects on that. They may come from something else. The person with the brain fog may have something else totally, or maybe their neck's out of place. Or because the heavy amount of fibrin, it may be pulling their neck out of place. But for fibrinous tissue, this really, really works great. One important thing is, a lot of my formulas are very specific for those things, which is why they work so well. You try to do too many things with a formula, it's going, well, I got a nice dinner I made here. It's all in one pot, and it's a combination of Italian food and a dessert and Chinese food and Thai food and Greek food all in one dish, and you go, blah. Separately, they're fantastic and they're the most wonderful things, but you try to do too many things with a formula sometimes, you can lose the impact. I try to keep mine very streamlined, very to the point, and very specific, which is why they do what they do.
Great. Let us review some of the formulas individually.
Please.
I would like you to please talk a bit about the formula that you have chosen to launch for the program with veterans. The
cortisol.
Let's just outline a bit about what you're doing for the veterans, and then let's talk about the formula itself.
For sure. This is a very magical time. I know when this gets seen at a later date, we spent a lot of the time on the phone today with the senator's office and beginning just to talk a little bit with some of the lower echelon folks over at Wounded Warriors. I'm a wartime veteran. I was a paramedic during the Vietnam era. I ended up staying stateside, fortunately. I took care of a lot of the guys coming back. I was a ward master at nighttime during the service at the age of 18. We used to work 6 days a week, 12-hour shifts. I was on from 7 at night to 7 in the morning. So I saw that for years. My father was a World War II hero. I had 2 boats blown out from underneath him and all kinds of things, and had, at the time, horrible PTSD that we grew up with. As a result, it destroyed our family. My father was a very brutal man. From that, was not his fault whatsoever because of the PTSD. My father's been dead for many years, and I love and respect my father, especially now that I understood what happened. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is a terrible thing that happens to people. It need not be only veterans, but also civilians. Abuse, rape, the horrors of things, verbal abuse, physical abuse, all of these type of things. This is what it does. It's the fight or flight reflex that becomes activated and doesn't stop. Imagine being in fight or flight 24/7 all of the time. When that happens, we have what's called a circadian rhythm in the body. We often do tests, which is called an adrenal stress index test through the clinic, which actually measures the cortisol in the body every 6 hours on that, so it's done it 4 times. Now, there's a particular rhythm for it. When we see people with PTSD, again, it could be military or civilian, here's a point where it should be here, suddenly it will spike like this. They do not need to have an incident to make that occur, to go into fight or flight. The fact is that the body has completely fallen out of its natural circadian rhythm, and it's happening all on its own. Excess cortisol perpetuates excess cortisol. And so once this whole chain starts, it doesn't stop. It just can't. It's one of the only, the way to put it is, maybe self-perpetuating machines in the world, seriously, that that does this, is this cortisol. So I had very severe PTSD just from living at home. The service, like I said, I did not see war. I took care of the folks coming back from there. Some years ago, I came in contact with a veteran who was in very bad shape. Now, I had a tendency, like most vets do, is you don't think about it. Nah, can't be me, can't be me. You read about it and you go, no, because I was in denial about it, as most vets are. I had met a vet that was in such bad shape, I was horrified. This is a little more than 3 years ago. And our landlady had hired him to do some work here. And he was not only rather insane with me in here, but he would come in, talk, and tell me how he wanted to blow up the VA and kill all the doctors. And I was actually wondering if I should call them or not, but I turned out that this was actually very common behavior with some vets. I was so horrified, I made a promise to myself, and I prayed, and I said, I will find a cure for this no matter what. It took some while. Well, actually, it wasn't that long, but it took me a while until I began to have an understanding. See, when you're going to design, the first question is, well, the phrase actually is beginning rightly. So you have to ask the right questions. If you don't, then it's not going to happen. You know, otherwise it's like saying, I have a list here of 1,000,000 number ones. If you go 1 and 1 is 2 on the first one, you can get all the others right. You still have a wrong answer. It doesn't matter. So the first thing I did was I asked myself, I says, well, what is excess cortisol in the body like? And I went, well, okay, well, that's like a neurotoxin. Okay, well, where do neurotoxins occur in nature? Well, we see them in things like box jellyfish, poisonous spider bites, rattlesnake bites, and so on. So I thought, okay, well, that's not too hard to neutralize. I had done that once, actually. I got myself stupidly bit by a rattlesnake when I was much younger and very thin. And I called the poison center afterwards, and they said, how much do you weigh and how big was the rattlesnake? It was a young one. So when they bite, they actually, everything comes out of it at one time, like that. So by the time I called them, my arm was starting to turn dark, and I was thinking, I really need to think about taking the next breath. Well, I had to test this formula, so I thought it's a do or die. When I was younger, I was a little wild. Well, actually, I was very wild. So I had a poison bite remedy, and I took it. And within moments, I could begin to breathe easier, and over the next hour, the darkness faded. So I knew how to neutralize neurotoxins, so we built this around it. This was so cool because we actually had this. I rebuilt that portion, and then we created a couple of other portions in there to help restore the normal hormonal or circadian rhythm of the body by working with the adrenals, working with the firing mechanisms of the neurosynapses, and so on. And the first person we gave it to, this is so cool, was a lady from Bosnia who had been there during the war and had a very terrible time. And she had a lovely younger daughter. And she brought her daughter with her to the sessions. She was a single mom at that time. And so I started to work with her, and I said, would you like to try something here? And she said, what? And as I mentioned earlier, all of our new formulas, we always give the first batch away. We've done that for decades, so it's this wonderful Earth Friend tradition. She said, okay. She came back next week. She's in tears, and the little girl's in tears, and I went, I wonder how that worked. The little girl came up to me, and she was looking at me. I bent down and she threw her arms around me and she said, "Thank you for giving me my mommy back." And we realized we had a winner. Excuse me. Being a healer sometimes, it really touches my heart.
You're a bit of an empath too, huh?
What's that?
You're a bit of an empath too.
I wouldn't say so much as the fact that I get very involved with my patients, the lives of my patients. Being a healer, I'm not a doctor. It's a bit different with it. But to see something like that occur, we knew we had something wonderful. So we began to try it out. As we can see from some of the testimonials there were people that had problems who were beaten, raped, all kinds of horrible things, war people, people who were addicted to things. And these are one of the times that we say, wow, it far exceeded our design expectations. It was time to try it with the first vets. The first vet, so we put out word at the clinic, and a remarkable gentleman came. He was a former captain of the Army Rangers, Mr. Sergeant Binkley. Sergeant was his first name. Sarge had spent 11 years in the military. He was a graduate of West Point. He was wounded several times, once or twice quite badly, and he was discharged in bad pain and let go. He could not get the, this is a really sad story, the next part, but it has a great ending. He could not get the medications that he needed from the VA, so he actually robbed 2 pharmacies at gunpoint for them. He was so out of his mind with pain and PTSD. We did an adrenal stress index test, and his cortisol levels were almost twice normal of what they should be. He's one of the bravest men I've ever met in my life, and courageous, because truthfully, a lot of people go out and become shooters in public with far less problems than that and a much, much lower cortisol level. But he controlled it just through his own will and basically went to bed and didn't come out much. So when we met him, my first thought was how damaged this man is. But I know he's going to heal. In a short while, he began to feel better. And in a while, he began to get his life back. He began to date. He got a great job. He has lovely parents. And what happened then was I had a patient who was a wonderful filmmaker from Sony Productions. And he came and he filmed a remarkable documentary on this. It's an interview with Sarge and his parents. And at the end of it, he says, "I've been given a second chance at life." Everyone can see this on bringourvetsallthewayhome.org. Again, that's bringourvetsallthewayhome.org. Please take a look at the video on there. It's the one on the left that says full. Like us on Facebook at Bring Our Vets. But this is what we have. Right now, we're in the midst of getting this out to the VA. We've been talking today, as I mentioned, with a congressman's office, and we've started to open up communications, hopefully, with Wounded Warriors. We'll see what they have to say with that. And we want to take this out to the world now. It begins to work in the first day or two. If I could actually read a little bit of a testimonial, please. This just came in today, just a few minutes ago, actually, before we started this. I'm not going to read the ending of it just because he starts to praise me, and that gets kind of embarrassing for that. But let me read what he had to say about himself. And this is from RG from San Diego. I was not sure how to use this thing, how to post a testimonial. He put it through that. I have had generalized anxiety disorder for 35 plus years. For 15 years, I was on multiple psych drugs for anxiety and depression. 1.5 years ago, I followed a program that had a natural path to getting off the psych drugs. I also made a commitment to eat 100% organically. It took 1 year and certainly was not easy, but I beat the odds and I got off all the 4 psych drugs! Exclamation. The depression lifted, but shaking off the anxiety had been very difficult, to say the least. I was at my wit's end and not being able to figure out what the main source of the anxiety was. I tried about every imaginable supplement and many different healing paths. I have been faithful to my 100% organic way of eating, drinking plenty of purified water, exercising regularly, and filling my mind with positive input. 2 weeks ago, I had family members fast and pray for and with me for the answer. The answer to those faith prayers came in the form of Elijah Free, that I had not heard of before, which surprised me in its incredible product, Cortisolase. Rather than me starting to feel the positive effects within a couple of weeks, I noticed the effect upon my first dosage. I am taking it daily as instructed. It has helped me sleep as well. I was going to bed between 1 to 3 a.m. I believe the Cortisolase has reset my circadian rhythm, wake-sleep cycle. I am now in bed and asleep by 11 p.m. every night. The daily anxiety switch that would flip on when I got up in the mornings has stopped switching on. This not only gives me relief, but it has given me hope for the future, and that I really can once and for all live an anxiety-free life. I am so grateful to have found Elijah Free. Since cortisol E started working on me so quickly, I also started taking TMJEs and arthritis-E's. And then it goes on to praise me, which I can leave out at the moment. That one just came in. I actually talked to him on the phone a few days ago, and I was one of those where I'd be embarrassed to say the things that he said about me. They were so remarkably lovely. But this is actually very, very common. The way it's designed, what it actually does at first is I found in that neurotoxin is the formula actually goes in and it begins to neutralize the excess cortisol in the system. Because it's a smart formula, it does not harm the the amount of cortisol that you need. So it only really just neutralizes the excess cortisol in the body, leaving you with what you need. So generally people take it 3 times a day. If you have trouble sleeping, you could take it before bed. On that, sometimes people take a 4th dose. Now, if you go to our site for Martin's, with this, you'll see that we have a whole lot of extra instructions on those. What you can do if you're having really bad PTSD episodes is you can just take it with you. Take a shot of it. Take a whole eyedropper if you need to. Take a second. That's enough. Usually what it does, it'll work by the time you count to 5 or 10, if it takes that long. And will work then with neutralizing the excess cortisol and bringing it back to normal levels. So it's a very, very fast worker. That was very, very, very important because if you're in a PTSD episode, you don't need to get better an hour later. You need to get better now. Our high hopes is that the government is actually going to adopt this protocol. We have written a medical study. A representative came in actually from the pharmaceutical industry and co-wrote the study with me. So it's actually a study which is, should be medically accepted. So we're really hoping and praying that the government will learn about this pretty soon from the folks that we're connecting with, and that this can become adopted by our military forces. The other thing is it works just as well for civilians. Think of it this way. If you got a flat tire here in California, you got one in Afghanistan, it's the same kind of flat tire. You fix it the same way. If you get PTSD in the United States or you get it overseas, it's still treated the same way. Vets have a different attitude towards it, of course, than civilians, because if something happens to you in civilian life, that's really being a victim. If you are a member of the armed forces, you went on your own and you were not a victim. That was your choice to go and serve and to fight. So we are not victims. I never thought of myself that way in the military. However, growing up and what occurred in my home life, yes, I did feel that way, but no longer feel that way. I will say it saved my marriage. On this, I went through 2 marriages, unfortunately, because of the PTSD symptoms, but I no longer have that. I have been with the most wonderful woman, especially now since I healed from this using my own formula. The other thing you can do with it that's cool, I don't know if I mentioned to you, Martin, I'm an avid training person. I love to physically train at 65. I think I broke a running record today, but I take it after training. With that, because we build up cortisol in weightlifting and running, and as a result, when you take that after doing some kind of arduous training, your body does not build up the same type of toxins and tire you out. You can build muscle faster and stay leaner with it.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, we'll have to add that to the site.
Yeah, Scott, I would actually have you put on screen. We have a list of all the symptoms that cortisol causes in the human body. I mean, we could probably go through them, but there's a good number of them that indeed would be a useful thing for people to be aware of, just how many aspects of their existence can be affected by excess cortisol that's not getting wiped away. So, Elijah, could this be used just on a spot need? Like, let's just say that I'm not dissolving or removing the cortisol fast enough, and I would like to just wipe it off. Like,
I'm sorry, say that again?
Can I use it just now and then on an as-needed basis? Just take a hit, or does it need to build up? Like,
it really needs. If you have a spiking cortisol problem, it really needs to be taken on a regular basis. With this. Otherwise, then, see, what you're doing, if there is a true cortisol spiking problem, That has affected the circadian rhythm of the body. So if it's intermittent, what you're doing, you're not going to bring it back to its normal rhythm. Just kind of here and there trying to tap it down. So we really encourage people that if they are having that symptomology, that the important thing here is that you remain really consistent with it for some time. Now, importantly also, too, even though this has to do with the adrenaline system, you do not take this with an adrenal formula. They're going in two different directions, you see.
Yeah, we'll explain the difference in just a moment. I just wanted to check with you, like, for instance, a person who's having difficulty going to sleep. Would it work? Would it work as a?
It would help, yes, if the problem is spiking cortisol. As you know, with how much you know about products, it could be a dozen different things on why a person can't sleep.
Right.
But it would only work. It won't make you tired. It will lower the cortisol to a normal level at that time. So if that's what's needed to help sleep, then it will help under those conditions. Otherwise, it won't. Again, it's a very specific formula for what it does.
Okay, well explained. Okay, so Elijah, let's talk about the adrenal ease. How is this different, and when and how would I use that?
Okay, it's like going in two different directions. The adrenal ease formula, we've had that around for a very, very long time. I did the first upgrade in that formula earlier this year. No, it was the end of last year when we were getting new labeling for it. But otherwise, that formula has been around since about 1984, 1985. So you can imagine the thousands of bottles of that has gone out. That's for things like being tired, fatigue, adrenal exhaustion, recovering from chronic illnesses, things on that order. What it does is it goes in, and it's an older style formula, which is very effective. It's called a tonic formula. Now, tonic herbology, what it does, it goes in and it actually feeds very specific cells of the body with highly specialized nutrients in a formulated base that actually is specifically designed for those particular organs. It gets so specific you can really target very specific functions of organs. One thing about my formulas is people go, well, I can make that. Here's all the ingredients. My amounts are really strange. I could have 16 parts of something, 1 part of another, 18 parts of something, 2 parts. So people have tried to duplicate my formulas, and they couldn't do it. There was a place I licensed to for a short while, and they had the hardest time because they kept saying, this stuff ain't going to work on it. And then they went, why does this work with it? So the adrenal, we use it for anything from people who feel exhausted, chronic fatigue, you had mentioned earlier, especially recovering from illnesses. It's nice for certain types of athletic endeavors, even though we do have an athletic formula that now that we really like a lot. So that's kind of the difference. Now, the thing is, this does not do anything with the cortisol. It strengthens the adrenals themselves. Cortisol leaves pretty much alone on that. So as a result, if you're having the spike in cortisol, you would go with the cortisol ease. If you're having an adrenal weakness on here, you would go with the adrenal ease formula. Now, basic dose is a half an eyedropper 3 times a day. If you're really tired, you can take it a 4th or even a 5th, but just that half an eyedropper. It's great for certain food cravings, for example, sugar, getting off of sugars, all types of sugars, and those mid-afternoon crashes between 2 and 3 p.m. on that. So what happens at that time is that the blood sugar drops and so on. When that occurs, you can carry the bottle of Adrenalise with you and take a whole eyedropper again, or even a second eyedropper of that. That will help to feed the adrenals and also to help rectify that portion of the circadian rhythm which is crashing below its normal level at that time of the day. So again, it helps to re-regulate the body very nicely.
Mm-hmm. So people who claim to be in adrenal exhaustion, is this the sort of thing that
exactly. Exactly. Now, if a person thinks they're adrenal exhaustion, truthfully, what I would say is you need to go to your doctor and have that tested with an adrenal stress index test. There are other things which can cause symptomology like that. So it's important, again, the right formula for the right condition. Otherwise, they just don't work. I've had people ask me, for example, on the fibro formula we mentioned earlier, does it do this, does it do this, does it do this, does it do this? It's like saying, hi, I have a flashlight. Is this a phaser or a laser? Can I play baseball with it? You know, can I do this with it? No, it's a flashlight on that. So the right formula for the right need is what really makes them work the best.
Well, of course,
I know when folks call
this will be challenging for the person to know what to pick unless we give them sufficient guidance, right?
Exactly.
I mean, in the absence of being able to go to the clinic, we need to give them enough information to figure out what to use and why.
Well, from my understanding, from people that I've talked to, because a number of people have called and asked questions, you're extremely knowledgeable yourself, Martin, and I know how many people are very grateful for the correct things that you've brought them to.
Thank you.
So talking to someone like you who's a knowledgeable person, you know, it's like going to the health food store and they have the vitamin department gurus over there. I've known folks that were actually naturopathic doctors and high-end acupuncturists that did not do well in practice, that actually really loved working in that store environment because they didn't need to have then the responsibility of a full-on patient care.
Right. Okay, so to wrap it up, the adrenal ease then is again just 10, 12 herbs extracted, or no, I shouldn't say extracted.
Well, that's extracted, correct? Yes.
Put into a tincture. So this would be your basic alcohol tincture wash, right?
Right. Let me mention something about our alcohol content. We use a bit of a different process. It takes 3 to 4 weeks to extract our herbs out. Now, how we do this is we're kind of doing this on a small scale still at the moment, getting big soon. Take a gallon bottle. On here, we put our herbs in. We put in our mixture, which is a combination of grain alcohol, vegetable glycerin, and distilled water. We let it sit for 3 to 4 weeks in there. We shake them up occasionally. Cha-cha-cha. What happens is, through that amount of time, it lets us keep a very, very low alcohol content in here. We use extra vegetable glycerin. It's all organic, of course. And by allowing that, we keep that alcohol content way, way, way down there. Some companies, big companies, I'm not going to mention any, of course, they use a very, very high alcohol content. It's a filtration method or a push method that goes through there, grabs a lot of the minerals and nutrients, and then you end up in a tincture, but then you end up with, you know, like a 40%, 50% alcohol content in there, which is really, really rough. The other thing, too, is that it takes a certain proportion of the grain alcohol, vegetable glycerin, and water to extract out certain alkaloids. Getting the alkaloids out of the dry herb, well, that's pretty much what a lot of it is about, not just alkaloids, but all the other elements and ingredients. So this is a fabulous method. It's very, very old. I have never come across anything in terms of making a tincture modern that gives me a better tincture for it, no matter how expensive or intricate it may be. It's just the way that it works. It's part of nature. We're doing something natural from nature. And we want to obey those particular laws of nature. And as a result, this is part of what gives us such a great extraction. The other thing is we put an awful lot of herb in there. Our herbs are very, very, very concentrated. I'm very happy to say it doesn't cost that much more for us to make, seriously, a more highly concentrated product. I mean, our yield is not very big from each pound of herb, but what it does. Now, this is an interesting concept because another company may say, well, that's okay. Look, you have a 1 ounce bottle here and it's $20. We'll give you a 2 ounce bottle for the same price. Take twice as much. You know what? It doesn't work that way. It's like the law of diminishing returns. If you haven't gotten a good extraction in the first place, taking 2 or 3 times the amount of another herb that has been poorly extracted is not going to make up for it. So most of ours are half an eyedropper 3 times a day. I see companies on the shelf, you're taking a teaspoon of that. And they may be a big 2 ounce bottle at a lower price. But the point is, A, it's a teaspoon of that. You're getting a lot more alcohol and things you don't need, and it's a very poor, weak extraction. It's like saying, I want to have a nice cup of tea, but this is so weak, I'm going to have to drink that much instead of this much for that.
Yeah, this totally reminds me of the method of food production by the industrial food processors who grow these beautiful looking broccoli that are practically devoid of minerals and other nutrients.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. What I would like to do is switch topics now and
Please.
bring you on to fungus ease.
Ah, you know, this formula, I could kiss this on a daily basis. I first made this for myself. I was pretty much dying from the most horrible fungus infection. I had gone to a very disreputable dentist who I didn't know was disreputable. I got so sick. In fact, I was just reading in Consumers, and I forget the name of the fungus that I got, but it's something that you get from dentists who are very disreputable, that over give you antibiotics that they put in you while they're doing work on it. I needed some extensive dental work that I had let go for a while. So I got so sick from this. Consumers said that 250,000 people get this a year from, 25,000 people get this a year from dentists, and 14,000 people die, and that was almost me. I was in bed, as my wife puts it, for about 2 weeks and couldn't get out. Goes back about 4 years now, I think. And without nasty side effects, trying to eliminate fungus, mold, and yeast. I like how you did that. I was so sick. I was dying, literally. I couldn't eat. Water was making me sick. I hadn't eaten much in days. Anything I had, if I could eat it on Monday, Tuesday made me sick as a dog. Water was making me bloat. I thought my life was over, and I had spent 2 weeks in bed just kind of ruminating on the end of my career and what to do. So I was lying there, and I went outside, and I could not find the beauty way anymore. I follow a number of different paths, and the beauty way is a Navajo way of saying the spirit of the world, and I had lost it. So I was sitting on the swing outside, garden swing, and just thinking, my life is over, what can I do? And so I prayed for a while, and I got an idea. Went into the lab, and I said, okay, we can easily eliminate fungus, but then you get die-off. And oh my God, the die-off. Die-off is when fungus, mold, and yeast begins to die. Unfortunately, what happens is the fungus, mold, or yeast that's left loves what's dying, and it begins to consume it. It then begins a resurgence. So you can take something to kill it off. I even tried allopathic medicines. That put me down in bed for 2 to 3 weeks right there also, too. Not saying anything against it, but the point was that the die-off was more than my weakened body could take. And then I thought, hey, what if we can neutralize that? When if we go to arthritis formula afterwards, I'll tell you a story about how I made the arthritis formula and what it's based on. Because what I did was I took some of the base of the arthritis formula, okay, with that I had made up. I took a fungus formula that we have. It's called black walnut combination. One day you'll have that there. We're going to release that actually for foot fungus. Incredible stuff. And I put them together. And what happened was, on the spot, I designed a formula that not only can beat that fungus, is it would neutralize the die-off in the system so you didn't get the effect of it. Yay. I took the formula, drank a lot of water, and within 3 days I could go back to work. Weak I was, but over a period of time I began to get my health back. Of course, I did some other things with that too. Literally, the formula saved my life. We sell more of that than anything. There's a clinic in D.C. that buys about 50 bottles of that every few weeks. Yeah. They used to use a number of other things. In fact, you introduced us together, Martin, yes, on that. And after trying our formula, we became their premier formula. So that actually, pretty much most of the time, is our best-selling formula. Now, importantly, if you're going to take this, oh, brilliant stuff, worked for me. Oh, thank you. What a lovely way to put that. If you're going to take it, though, you really need to eat an anti-fungus, anti-mold, and anti-yeast diet. One thing for patients that I tell them is, or ask, you got mold in your house. People go, I never have any mold. They check out and they get mold. So you have to check a number of things out on the side also with it. But otherwise, if you can do those things, this formula, wow, it does great things. And I am so grateful for this one, or I probably would not. In fact, I can tell you I wouldn't be sitting here anymore for quite a long time.
So people who are advised to take this or use this would be the ones who encounter the mold in the houses, like the dank basements and dank houses and what? Possibly, or maybe they met a terrible, disreputable dentist like I did that completely destroyed their immune system with ridiculous amounts of antibiotics and things. Okay.
on it,
I have
or
heard
they
of
may have a
people.
yeast overgrowth.
I have heard of people suffering from the black mold.
Yeah,
Inhale it or something like that.
that happened to me also too. Is I ended up inhaling a bunch all during
Okay.
that time when I was weakening from the other thing.
Yeah, and I've heard of people suffering from aspergillus uh, infections.
Yeah. Now, again, with those things, you have to rebuild the digestive tract. So if folks are listening, and you're going to take this, I would really strongly suggest you talk to Martin about some really, really good high-end probiotics. I had to take those afterwards, too. So there's some things that can really help that. I'm sure Martin is extremely knowledgeable, has some of the best anywhere for those, from what I've heard about the gentleman. But otherwise, this has just been, for myself, literally a godsend. There's been a few of my formulas that have really helped me to, continue my life in the manner that I would like to.
Okay.
Coconut oil, there you go.
Great.
Yeah.
And so the how to use it is simple, just
Half an eye
day,
dropper
3 times a
a day. Yes, and that should do it. Half an eye dropper 3 times a day. If you're really, really, really sick, I would suggest maybe you start off with a few drops, 2 or 3 times a day on that, to let it build up in your body in terms of slowly eradicating. If a person's body is really heavily inundated, embedded with a lot of fungus, mold, or yeast, you start at a slower basis. It can only handle so much of the die-off, and you don't want to push it. So if you've been sick for a long time, please start at a small dose of that and kind of build up. You can always ask Martin about it. He's really good.
Okay, so Elijah, you have alluded to this other formula that gave birth to the fungus ease and
The arthritis took a
ease.
portion out of that.
Could you tell a bit about that?
Oh, you bet. This one was one of the more fun formulas I've ever made. I had designed the fibro formula, and I went, whoa, we're onto something brand new. So anyhow, I hadn't been designing for a while. In the clinic, I have been doing, well, I'm a structural therapist. I specialize in spinal cord reconstruction, and a lot of my practice was that. And because we have a number of doctors who use natural things, a number of years ago, I had done very little with herbs and wasn't sure what to do anymore with things. But this was right before I designed a whole lot of the new wonderful things, which of course my practice, it was like add water after that. The whole thing just kind of sprang up into big blossoms, which was beautiful. So I gave myself an assignment to get back into designing, and I thought, what was something that I've never really done well with, and that was an arthritis formula. Not osteoarthritis, but the kind of arthritis that the calculi that builds up in things. Remember that rheumatoid arthritis is an autoimmune problem on that, which I think we may be right on the verge of doing something with autoimmune on this. We need a little more testing, but if something is what I think it is, we got some pretty exciting things coming up pretty soon, Martin. So I gave myself, and I said, there could only be 5 herbs in here. And that's that. Well, I designed it in 4 herbs. Now, this is how we did this. This is so cool. So I love to read a lot about nature and correlations in nature. So I had read a long time ago about an old way that was used back hundreds of years ago for calculi arthritis. Is they would take a person, bury them up to their neck and next to an anthill, and before they did it, they would slather them with honey. Well, the ants would come and they get hundreds of ant bites. Well, ants have formic acid in their mouths, which is one of the most remarkable alkalizers. Well, what just kind of happens in nature, and I love to equate things like this in nature. This is how a lot of the older herbalists used to do this. If we had hours, I could tell you all these great stories and things, but I'll keep to the point somewhat. So I said, okay, well then, if formic acid did that, where's the closest place that it occurs in the herbal kingdom? Well, it's in Irish moss. Chondrus crispus has fumaric acid. So it's only a molecule or so away, and we can kind of bend that over in that direction. I'm sorry, my mistake. It was Iceland moss. Irish moss comes up later. It's Iceland moss, Crataria islandica, that has fumaric acid in it. And like I was saying, it's only about a bit of a molecule away from the other. But if we combine it with some Irish moss, whoa, that kind of pulls it into that direction. Then what we did, we used regular garden variety hydrangea root because we needed to have an exit point of the body for that. And hydrangea just happens to have a particular type of phosphorus in it. And what that does, that actually helps to break down kidney stones. So what we did, we put it all together like this, and then we added an herb in there just to help direct it. So we did it in 4 herbs instead of 5. Let me tell you about that herb, how fast that works for type of calculi buildups. It's great for bone spurs. When I was younger, I used to be kind of rough, and I broke some bones in my feet. This goes back quite a few years ago that I had this particular problem. I feel like a guinea pig for these things. Well, what happened was the upper top of my left foot was starting to hurt a lot. One night, it woke me up. It was in the middle of the summer, and I was getting ready to go on a vacation up to Mount Shasta for 5 days to go hike up in the mountains and photograph. It got so bad my foot before I went was that the cover, the sheet at night, woke me up. It hurt, and my foot felt like cut glass in it. And I'm going, I can't hike. I can't do anything. And I kept thinking I must have banged my foot. Then I remembered I had actually broken some of the bones in my foot, and I went, well, I've got calculi arthritis in here. Whoa. Well, anyhow, it's about 10 days away from my trip, and I'm going, maybe I should cancel this because they're going to keep the money for the place and everything. So I took the formula. By the 4th day, the pain went away. I took it for 3 months, and I've never had a problem since. We use this one a lot in the clinic. But again, it's specific. It's not for rheumatoid arthritis. It's not for osteoarthritis, which is losing bone mass and density. It's for those type of calculi. Again, if you can get into a good diet, talk to Martin about that if you need to. If you can get into a good diet, now that's going to make a big difference with that also. But we've had wonderful, wonderful, wonderful results with this formula, and it's so simple, and the whole thing is actually based around an ant bite. So that's why I want to tell you about this one, because we took some of the base of that, put it together with black walnut leaves and hulls. We used the green hulls, and burdock root and seeds, and that gave us funguses.
Awesome.
That was very awesome, let me tell you. Or different things. This is how this originally began. It was nature expressing itself, and we as humans paying attention to what's being told to us. So I still work in the old ways. As I mentioned, I'm probably one of the old timers now left, because I actually still at this point make pretty much all the herbs. I design them and I work in practice, and that gives me this wonderful capacity to be able then to see what is needed and then see it turn around and actually work in such a beautiful and lovely manner that nature's given to us.
So thank you very much, Elijah. We're going to close out. I would like to promise people that we're going to bring you back and record yet another session. But for today, I would like to say, if you have any questions, follow us at life-enthusiast.com. Call us at 1-866-543-3388, or come to, I don't know what else. I think I said it. We're here every day from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. I keep long hours.
It's been a fantastic experience working with you, Martin, and Maureen, and we just really can't thank you enough for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, this is Life Enthusiast, restoring vitality to you and to the planet. Thank you, everyone, for listening tonight.